welcome you to yet another edition of Great American Stories. And today's episode is entitled just like the last one. Remember the Alamo, and here's why. But this is part two. And this really digs into the battle and why it is so crucially important for people to maybe learn a little bit more about what really happened and why that battle resonated with people through the generations. I'm Ron Hoon. We have John Noetzel joining us today. He is the creator of Great American Stories. And Trenton Hooker joins us. Trenton is, John, would you say, what is he, our resident Texas historian?
Absolutely.
Alamo and all other...
All things Texas.
He could probably do the Johnson Space Center.
Sure.
I mean, you talk about anything in Texas, Trenton's the man.
No doubt, no doubt.
For sure.
Our expert, for sure. Thanks
Glad
for
to be
joining
here.
us. Yeah.
So, you guys, when we left with our last episode last week, we promised that we would really get into the battle. And honestly, there are some things that are very difficult to even talk about when it comes to what actually happened inside the walls of the Alamo. And I guess, you know, we've led you up to that very moment. There's a siege that's lasted close to 2 weeks now. And just life is getting more and more difficult inside the Alamo itself, which of course today is right in downtown San Antonio. But John, where do you want to go with this with Trenton when it comes to what happens next?
Well, so yeah, you're right. We set the stage on our last episode, and leading up to this siege. But let's dig right in. Let's talk about what was going on behind those walls and who was leading, and some of the key figures. I think that's one of the things we talked about last week, that we really wanted to highlight some of the figures, the Davy Crockett's, the William Travis's. Why don't we go ahead?
Well, we talked about the command structure, you know, how this was set up, and, you know, really you look at who was in charge of the Alamo, and that's an interesting topic. So pre-battle, before Santana actually arrived, you had a man, Colonel James Nell. He was the commander of the Alamo garrison that was there, and, you know, just like so many armies of the time, especially during the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, you know, these were family men that had obligations, who at times, you know, the militias that were raised and these armies that came together, they had things at home that called them to return. And Neil's family, he got word that his family had come down with illness, that they were on death's door, and he had to make the difficult decision to leave them in at the Alamo and go back to his family. But, you know, told them that he would try to take care of his affairs as they were happening, to make their way back, to stand with the men at the Alamo to defend. They thought they had a lot more time. And so directly, this goes to about February 23rd, he hands over command to William Barrett Travis. Again, he's a 26-year-old Army officer. He's also a lawyer that came over to Texas to try to make a life for himself, but he's young in command at the time. You know, this is his first major responsibility as it's going to happen.
He's in his 20s.
Yes.
Right?
Amazing. And so also...
As for frame of reference, Davy Crockett's 49.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's the old man.
He's the old man there. So
I think I heard somewhere that the oldest of all the defenders that day was 54 or 56 years old. And the youngest was actually a teenager.
Wow.
Yes.
And so, I mean, there was a wide range, but the majority of those that were involved in this battle were probably in their 20s and 30s. And what brought them there, Trenton? Why would they specifically decided to literally go into, nobody knew, of course, that it was going to end in slaughter. I think up until the last day or so of the siege, there was still great hope that there would, literally, there would be more and more men that would ride to their rescue, and for the most part, that didn't happen. Why did they want to be there?
So it was not only the strategic position of where the Alamo was in San Antonio de Har, but it was also the garrison had an enormous supply of artillery at the time. So, you know, scores of cannons, larger artillery that, you know, the Texian army had supplied at the Alamo, and the idea is that they could hold the line just long enough that, you know, reinforcements could come and really reposition those men to move those supplies out, that they could go back to Goliad, that they could go back and resupply Sam Houston's troops, where, you know, that's farther east, Nacogdoches, those larger areas where, you know, kind of the precursor of where Houston was at the time. But the idea is to hold the line long enough that they could get reinforcements to them. And again, they thought they had until the middle of March. That's the idea. So, you know, again, Travis takes command over the troops, and immediately there's kind of a half of you know, the army, the more seasoned troops are with Travis on that side, the more side of the military, and then the other side are the volunteers that are led by James Jim Bowie, you know, of the notorious, you know, Bowie knife that happens. But Bowie's troops, you know, they're made up of volunteers. This is also where Davy Crockett fits into it. Volunteers that had come over who hadn't had time to become part of the formalized troops. And there's this power struggle in between Bowie's leadership and also Travis's leadership. And they actually decide to take a vote. The volunteers push for that on the next day, on the 24th. And there is, you know, a vote that happens where, again, it's still split. Both men take kind of a joint leadership role in it. And something I found kind of interesting in preparing for this, and a lot of great books on this topic too, but, you know, Bowie and Travis actually had a relationship. A year before, it was actually Bowie who had a letter from Travis, wrote to him and said, you know, "Dear Jim Bowie, I would like you to come to Texas to join the war party," because there was a divide in the Texians of, are we going to go to war with Mexico, are we going to defend our interests, or are we going to try to resolve for peace? And it was actually Travis who wrote Bowie to get him to join the cause of the militia army, the volunteer army, to go in the fight on the side of the Texians. So the men had a relationship there, and, you know, really it kind of just goes to Bowie's personality. You know, he's a very strong-willed man, you know, really kind of an outlaw frontiersman, to be able to kind of fit in this regimented army. And ultimately, as we kind of hinted at in last episode, Jim Bowie the next day came down with mysterious illness. Some were saying it was a typhoid pneumonia, but basically he's put on his sickbed and wiped out, you know, of participating in the initial stages of the siege.
So Travis takes over, right? I mean,
Yes.
he's the commandant now.
Yes.
He's in charge.
Well,
He's
you
in charge.
covered Bowie for us. Davy Crockett might have been the most famous man in America at this time.
Yeah.
I've heard him described as our first true celebrity. What brought him there out of the hills of Kentucky?
Yeah, very interesting. So, you know, Davy Crockett, like you mentioned, not only was he a frontiersman and a mountain man, but he was also an 8-term congressman from Tennessee. So he had the political know-how, he had the outdoors know-how, and he was also served in the United States Army in the War of 1812.
That's right.
He had battle experience, he commanded troops, he was also a scout, he was also an Indian tracker. Very interesting. But again,
A member of the Whig Party.
right?
We should
Yes.
Okay.
point.
Yes,
Sure.
definitely.
So, you know.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
But again, it's this idea of establishing oneself in this new frontier and being able to, you know, actually make something for yourself, new frontier, new opportunity, and the call to adventure, really, for Crockett that wasn't really there anymore in Tennessee. He felt that, you know, it had kind of run its course. And I love the line. I don't know if you both are familiar with this, but this was widely distributed at the time to newspapers, what Crockett told his constituents when he was going to Texas. He said, "I told the people of my district that I would serve them as faithfully as I had done, but if not, they might go to hell as I would go to Texas." Great line.
There you
Great
go.
line.
They didn't print that up on some T-shirts.
Seriously.
They have
Yeah.
already.
Oh,
I
have
can
they?
tell you, Texans are very proud of the line. You can all go to hell, but I will go to Texas.
That's
Interesting.
great.
Interesting.
All right,
Yeah.
let's set the stage,
Yeah.
Johnny. Right,
Yeah.
let's do this now. It's early morning, and I mean it's pre-dawn, and the battle is about to begin.
We're talking about March 6th.
Yes.
March 6th, 1836. So we're at
Yes.
the end of that 13-day standoff.
Yeah, which we covered a lot of that in the first episode. But now let's get to the moment of battle. Probably not a surprise that they are going to, try to launch in an early morning raid, basically the full attack. Try to catch these guys off guard. From what I understand, things were very quiet the night leading up to it, as opposed to some other nights, where there might have been some gunfire, etc. It's almost eerily quiet, and then what happens?
Well, the interesting part is that, you had the commanders, the Mexican commanders at the time, who told Santana, we just need to wait these guys out. We have been doing these little skirmishes for the past 12 days. The defenses are crumbling, but we can wait them out. They're cut off. Provisions won't happen. If we do that, they'll eventually just surrender, and we can take this entire garrison. Santa Anna wanted to push on, and you got 5 o'clock in the morning when this started. 1,800 Mexican troops moving on 4 directions. So you have basically the garrison of the Alamo in the middle, defended by artillery all along its walls. You got 4 of them moving in, and
against a force of about 185, 89 people.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, the Texian army, they tried to do what they could with those outer perimeters, but the size of this army and the odds stacked against them, it's overwhelming.
Where did they make their first entry? And tell us about the walls that protected the Alamo. How easy or difficult was it to get over the walls and get that first breach?
Right. So the initial walls, were a little smaller that they had, but again, it's just the sheer size that we're able to come over those. And the interesting and also tragic part of this battle is that William Travis, leading a team on one of those outer walls, he was one of the first to die in that. So immediately you had, that initial perimeter where you had artillery able to fire at the Mexican troops, but when Travis goes, that initial command structure goes, the troops, start to see the panic starts to set in, and that breach initially does happen, if you want to go into it a little more.
We are going to go to break, but as we do, we want to ask you a question. Think about this at home, and we'll be back here in just a couple of minutes with the answer. Davy Crockett's dad, John, fought in which significant battle in the Revolutionary War? A, Battle of Kings Mountain, B, the Battle of Saratoga, or C, the Battle of Bunker Hill? One of those 3. That's a fighting family.
That's a good one.
Wow.
Yep.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to The Great American Story, and we are in Texas at one of the most iconic places in our country. You could certainly say that. And everybody's heard of the Alamo, and they've even heard the battle cry, "Remember the Alamo," but they may not be, knowledgeable about the specifics of the battle. And we have literally walked ourselves up in the last couple of episodes with Trenton Hooker, one of our producers here at Fox 10, and of course with Johnny Noetzel, the creator here of this new streaming show, to the moment they breached the walls. Oh, but first, let's, I'm so into this story, I want to get right to it.
It's all good.
But by the way, so I'm the only one of the 3 of us who doesn't know the answer here. Davy Crockett's dad, John, I'm going to say that it was the Battle of Bunker Hill, A, B, and C. Am I wrong or right, Johnny?
You are about, I don't know, maybe 900 to 1,000 miles away.
Okay.
So
Is this closest without going too far east or west or whatever?
It's actually the Battle of Kings Mountain.
Oh, is it?
Which took place in South Carolina in 1780, and it was actually, was just a little tidbit, that was actually a turning point in the Revolutionary War for the Southern Theater. For many reasons. That's another episode.
I should have known that our designated South Carolinian here on the set would have, done his research on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to it here.
For sure.
The noose is continuing to tighten, and then they actually break through, Trenton. So go ahead and tell us what happened.
Yeah, so when you had the breakthrough that happened, again, that's where the tactics change of the Mexican troops, where they're no longer worried about being in formation, maintaining their lines. They're seeing the panic in the Texian army also, where you're surrounded on four sides. There's nowhere to retreat but inward. And again, that's where it moves from traditional, muskets in line falling back in formation. Next line up, the ones who just shot their muskets are moving back to reload, to now it's bayonets, now it's knives. It's hand-to-hand combat. And it is the most brutal, really, of this battle, and also the brutal that they can do.
And we should say this was a 90-minute skirmish fight, right? I mean, I shouldn't call it a skirmish. It was much more than a skirmish.
Right.
90 minutes. That's it.
Right. And how it's portrayed in Hollywood, also of legend, you think about this as being an all-day siege, and it's hours long, and but really, like you mentioned, I mean, it was over and done with pretty quickly.
We're going to have some kind of shocking, really, details, I think, over the next few minutes. But to me, Trenton, one of the things that I think I was the most shocked about is there was basically, like, if you want to call it a hospital or an area of convalescence for soldiers who had been wounded in previous battles. That number somewhere around 20, maybe as many as 30. And even though they were defenseless, when the Mexican troops came in, they slaughtered them all, one by one.
Yes.
It's incredible.
And when you go to the Alamo, kind of like you mentioned, when you walk into some of those rooms, there's a weight you feel. Also, those stories are able to be retold there, and you feel it. You see also the things that the descendants of those who fought in the Alamo have brought there to honor the dead. And, again, the convalescence hospital, the slaughter that took there, Santa Anna's order that no soldier should survive. There's no surrender. You just got to think about those last minutes of those wounded soldiers, of knowing there's no escape from this. There's no way that they could get out, that these are their final moments, and seeing those that they fought with next to them, their brothers in arms, being killed and, really slaughtered in gross ways. It's painful.
Do we know, you said there were 1,600. By the way, there were about 6,000 troops in the area in general, so some 1,600 closed in. Do we know how many actually breached and got into the compound?
That's a great question. So I've seen estimates of 1,600 to 1,800 actually got in. Wow. But again, you're
10 to 1,
right?
Or worse,
Easily.
12 to 1 maybe.
Easily. It's remarkable how all that happened. And again, just like we mentioned, the intensity of the final moments of the battle, where, as we set up in the last episode, you had the chapel at the center of the mission. Really, that was the original structure at the Alamo, and every Texian is making their way back there as this final stand. Part of the hospital too, one of the heroes of the battle, James Bowie, he was on his sickbed as it happened, and just fascinating details, the final report of those who were able to go in the days after the battle, of seeing Mexican troops all around Bowie, and Bowie, I believe, was shot in the head 7 or 8 times. Had his famous Bowie knife out, but he was able to make that last stand even on his deathbed and defend himself.
One of the groups that I think about so much during this would be the family members who had gathered. And when you go there and you walk through the chapel, you just kind of take a left and you're just right in there. It's so close, called the sacristy. Yeah. And by the way, the chapel had no roof on it.
Right.
It was open air.
That's right.
And you're into the sacristy, and it, I guess, looks pretty much the same today as it did way back when. But they are knowing that their loved ones are literally feet away, and they don't know if they're going to live through this battle or whether they've been gunned down. I mean, just the emotional swings there for that full 90 minutes must have been unbelievable.
Yeah. This is maybe I'm going back a week here, but why the order for no mercy from Santa Anna?
So again, it goes into a lot of Santa Anna's character, at least historians that I feel are pretty expert on this topic, they talk about his rise to power, how at the time in Mexico, especially with the system that was in place, the caste system, he from the beginning wanted to consolidate his power. He took over as president of Mexico, the year before, and the idea that he really wanted to lead as an empire, taking over. So the idea that any challenge to his power was seen as unacceptable from the beginning, be it in the halls of Mexico City or these outer regions of Texas, which is, as he saw, this was a full rebellion he wanted to squash. He also saw the Texians as being inferior as people, but especially as soldiers on the field of battle. He saw them assembling as truly an insult to his leadership and wanted to personally go out there to quell it, to consolidate his power, to show Mexico City that he was capable of leading in the halls of power and government, but also leading troops on the field and
in ruthless fashion.
Right, in ruthless fashion, the only way possible to really push back on any American presence in his empire.
One of the pictures I took when I was there a few years ago is of the Davy Crockett statue. It's believed that he fell somewhere right about there. You've mentioned the other two big names, but let's talk a little bit about Davy Crockett. Do we know, was he one of the first to die, one of the last to die? What do we know about his death?
So again, with the Alamo, it's such a treasured story in Texas history, its birth, how it came to be, that, again, mixing what is legend with what is fact can be a little difficult, especially towards the end of the battle. And, as some historians believe it to be absolute fact, some believe it to be more legend, Davy Crockett was one of the last 7 survivors who survived that hand-to-hand combat, the final, most gruesome part of the siege on the Alamo. The last 7 who were still alive that Santa Anna decided would face summary execution.
All right.
As I did some research on Davy Crockett, I came across an article in a Texas historical magazine that said that he was very active in the fight, and Travis had a lot of confidence in him. And according to this article, he was animating the men to do their duty. And other reports told of the deadly fire of his rifle that killed 5 Mexican gunners in succession as they each attempted to fire cannon bearing on the fort, and that he may have just missed Santa Anna. I find really
Imagine
interesting
how history could have turned on that.
Indeed. But legendary, obviously, and then was, how he died. There are.
I think part of the outrage that the country felt immediately afterwards, back in those days, it took days, if not weeks, for the news to get out, was the fact that even after killing every one of the defenders, they then took their bodies and set them in huge piles and did a funeral pyre, basically set all of the bodies of these dead men on fire, Trenton.
Yeah, did not let their families come back to be able to bury the remains. And also, just the gruesomeness of how those men, their bodies were desecrated. And again, this wasn't a structured funeral pyre. These were just remains that they lit on fire and could care less about how they were disposed of. And really those remains, sat there for quite a while. Santa Anna, to his credit, didn't kill the women and children, did allow a contingent of them to have safe passage to go. I believe it was, he gave them $2 and a mule to be able to go back east towards where the contingent of the Texians were, with meeting, also at Washington on the Brazos, which is another part of it, maybe for another episode, where that Texas Declaration of Independence was able to be signed, where Sam Houston was at the time. And again, just the brutality of it.
We just have a minute left. Tell us about the impact of the battle and how it ultimately led to victory for Sam Houston and for Texas independence.
Yeah, so again, this is the quintessential battle of the Texas Revolution, where "Remember the Alamo" became the battle cry. Shortly afterward, after the battle where it fell, you had the massacre at Goliad, which is in itself another horror. Up to 400 people were slaughtered during that. That momentum was able to be a rallying cry where Sam Houston, the Texian army, the newly formed establishment of the Republic of Texas government, because they were able to get enough time to form a Declaration of Independence, to have the workings of a constitution together, to consolidate that. The Battle of the Alamo, the sacrifice of that, was able to give the fledgling government enough time to organize, and really that became the rallying cry where volunteers came together. San Jacinto and Sam Houston was able to lead them on the field against Santa Anna and win.
Well, it's just an amazing story, and one that we really wanted to share with you in one of our earliest episodes. John, closing thoughts, and then also how can people connect with us on social as well?
Here you have X and Instagram, and follow us, and good episode. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Trenton, thank you as well.
Thank you, guys.
And we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The Great American Story. Connect with us on social if you can.